It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. I'm Bridget Bergen, senior reporter in the WNYC and Gothabus newsroom, filling in for Brian today. I hope you are staying cool. Coming up later in the show, my colleague Michael Saul Warren brings us news from New Jersey, including Representative Tom Kean Jr.'s return to the House and the state's new budget. Plus, historian Sarah Pearsall takes a wider lens on the American Revolution and talks about its effects around the world, beyond this continent. Then we end the show with a roundup of some of the events around town this weekend to celebrate the country's big 250th birthday. There's a lot going on. But we're going to start things off today with a deep dive into President Trump's latest financial disclosure filing. Perhaps you've heard a bit about this. The headlines are everywhere. The president reported making $1 billion, yes, billion with a B, in the first year of his presidency from cryptocurrency investments alone. That comes in addition to earnings from his real estate portfolio, various royalty deals, and even some lucrative legal settlements. These windfalls are raising the ire of ethics watchdogs who say his conflicts of interests, particularly in the crypto space, are unprecedented. The president and his spokespeople deny any conflicts of interest. Joining me now to unpack where all the president's money is coming from is Wall Street Journal reporter David Uberti, who covers the intersection of financial markets and the economy. David, welcome to WNYC.
Thanks so much for having me.
And David, let's start big picture. What were the president's overall earnings reported in that disclosure filing from last year?
Well, we've been pouring through this roughly 900-page document in recent days and trying to basically tally up all of these various line items. And what we've found is, in terms of income, actual cash money in the president's pocket, he reported some $2.2 billion in income in 2025. Now, in the lead-in to my introduction, you mentioned how he raked in something like $1 billion from various cryptocurrency ventures. By our calculations, it's actually something like $1.4 billion, as well as roughly $600 million from his, real estate and hospitality empire, broadly speaking, which is an uptick from other recent years, as well as tens of millions of dollars from royalties and licensing fees, everything from licensing deals for hotels to book royalties, as well as licensing deals for Trump-branded guitars, Trump-branded watches, and finally tens of millions of dollars of legal settlements from both tech and media companies across the economy. So last year I began reporting on the Trump family's business interests more extensively, and he's released these types of disclosures for going on a decade now since his first term. The amount of money he reported in terms of income last year blew every one of those other reports out of the water.
Wow. Well, we're going to dig deeper into some of those line items that you mentioned, some of those different buckets of earnings. I did mention the crypto earnings because it is it's the largest of the buckets. And when I think back to, the start of this administration, I think of that Trump meme coin he launched ahead of the inauguration. Is that what helped bring in this, $1 billion+ dollars?
So there's two basic buckets that we're talking about with regard to Trump's reported cryptocurrency income. One was this Trump-branded meme coin that you referenced. The tagline for it was $Trump. And per his financial disclosure, he reported income through an entity linked to this coin of some $600+ million. And essentially what happened was entities linked to Trump launched this coin. It skyrocketed in value momentarily. It appears that during that period, President Trump made a ton of money off of it. And then the coin subsequently crashed. And so we have some new reporting out today that in the months since that coin was actually launched, the vast majority of other holders of that coin are actually underwater.
Yeah.
So while Trump and apparently other large cryptocurrency traders who may or may not be connected to Trump made money off of this venture. It appears that most people who bought into it, whether they're political followers or whether they're cryptocurrency enthusiasts, actually lost money on this. So that is one bucket of the cryptocurrency empire. The other bucket is a crypto project by the name of World Liberty Financial. It was co-founded with Trump and his sons, as well as the sons of Steve Witkoff, who's a special envoy for the president as well. World Liberty Financial, Trump made something like $800 million from this venture, and it was through a combination of him, or rather the company issuing tokens through World Liberty Financial, which various investors can buy, as well as Trump selling equity in that company to various people. And as some of my colleagues at the Wall Street Journal have reported over the last year or so, a very large portion of that equity stake was bought by a royal connected to the United Arab Emirates. So we see this sort of set of interconnections, not only between Trump with these potential conflict of interest with the cryptocurrency industry itself, but also potential conflicts with some of our geopolitical partners who may have a vested interest in trying to change U.S. policy as well.
And David, I understand from some of your reporting that in that equity stake sale, there was another piece of it that had to do with artificial intelligence and access to what I understand was some pretty, top secret artificial intelligence information. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Right. So as some of my colleagues reported, that specific equity sale was through was backed by a person by the name of Sheikh Tahnoon bin Zayed Al Nahyan, who's an Abu Dhabi royal. He'd been pushing for U.S. access to tightly guarded AI chips, according to some of my colleagues reporting. This guy is sometimes referred to as the spy sheikh. He's brother to the UAE's president, as well as the leader of the oil-rich country's largest wealth fund. And he oversees more than a $1.3 trillion empire funded by his personal fortune and state money that sort of spans fish farms to AI and surveillance. In any case, he put a huge bet on a Trump-backed company funneling hundreds of millions of dollars into World Liberty Financial. And the long and short of it, per my colleagues' reporting, was that, this guy was trying to get AI hardware. Wow. That had largely been, off limits to him because the technology is sensitive, and there are fears among many people from the U.S. national security community that some of that technology, in one way or another, could make its way to China.
Listeners, if you're just joining us, I'm Bridget Bergen, filling in for Brian Lehrer this morning, and I'm joined by Wall Street Journal reporter David Uberti. We're talking about President Trump's most recent financial disclosure filing, which has a lot of information, nearly 900 pages worth. And we'd like to invite you to be part of this conversation. The president made a windfall on cryptocurrency. Have you invested in any form of crypto? What prompted you to do that, and how's it going? The number is 212-433-WNYC. That's 212-433-9692. You can call or text that number. I'm also interested in any of your stories about having a job that required you to disclose your investments, perhaps even restricted what you could invest in because of potential or perceived conflicts of interest. What do you make of the perception of conflicts of interest being raised about President Trump's earnings? Again, the number is 212-433-WNYC. That's 212-433-9692. You can also ask a question of my guest, Wall Street Journal reporter David Uberti. David, you cranked out, it looked like, was it like 6 stories about this filing? Just since it, was released on Tuesday, there are charts, there are graphs, everything kind of blows my mind. I want to go back a little bit more on the crypto piece of it. As I understand, there's the Trump meme coin, and then there was a stable coin. And perhaps because this is all sort of new terminology to many of us, myself included, the stable coin, is that what you were saying was the token that the World Liberty Financial sold? I'm just trying to understand the difference between these two currencies.
Sure thing. So there's various types of cryptocurrencies. The most famous of cryptocurrencies out there is Bitcoin, which is oftentimes used as a barometer for the health of the broader industry. But aside from that, there's a whole host of other types of cryptocurrencies. Anyone can launch a cryptocurrency. And some of these cryptocurrencies are known as meme coins, which, as everyone knows who've invested in these things, they're notoriously boom and bust. Many of them are jokes. You might remember something called Dogecoin,
Sure.
which was sort of like the sort of prototypical meme coin of the dog on the internet. But these things can kind of shoot up in value. People bet on them. It's akin to gambling, and they collapse in value overnight. And the sort of psychology behind it is people just want to get in fast, before all of the other people behind them, and then get out as quickly as they possibly can. Trump launched a meme coin last year, which obviously has never happened in US presidential history. And it goes without saying that many people in the crypto industry who want to be taken more seriously do not like this. Because it's very clearly a way for him to cash in, which, as we saw with his financial disclosures, was successful from his point of view. Stable coins, on the other hand, are a different type of cryptocurrency, and their value, whereas meme coins or Bitcoin might actually fluctuate, stable coins are supposedly pegged to assets such as the US dollar. So they're a way for investors or traders or cryptocurrency enthusiasts who like the idea of digital assets or like the ease with which they can move money across digital markets to actually have a coin whose value will, in theory, be stable with the US dollar. So that is the type of coin that World Liberty Financial was issuing. And that's the type of coin that World Liberty Financial sold en route to making hundreds of millions of dollars, in addition to that equity sale that you and I discussed involving that UAE official.
And so has that stablecoin seen more profit than the meme coin?
I think on a one-to-one comparison, the meme coin was probably more profitable for Trump himself. But if you look at the totality of World Liberty Financial, if you look at the stablecoin sales in addition to that equity sale, the total that we're finding from his financial disclosures is something on the order of $800 million from World Liberty Financial.
Wow. So
in total, that was the largest driver of his cryptocurrency earnings last year.
$800 million, you said there. I mean, these numbers are just they're so staggering. It's so hard to wrap your head around. Listeners, we're talking about President Trump's latest financial disclosure filing, which shows the billions in earnings he made in the first year of his presidency. And we're asking for your reaction. What are your thoughts on seeing a sitting president make $2 billion plus while in office? Have you made any investments in any forms of crypto? What's been your experience? And what's your reaction to some calls that these investments or these earnings reflect a conflict of interest? The number is 212-433-9692. Again, 212-433-9692. You can call or text that number. David, we're going to talk more about the crypto investments, but I want to sort of put that on simmer while we look at some of the other sources of the president's sky-high earnings. As you mentioned, he was first and foremost thought of as a real estate baron here in New York. How has that real estate portfolio done? What kind of assets? What are some of the assets we're still talking about there? And how did he do on that?
Well, generally speaking, we can say the world of those business ventures is expanding, the long and short of it. If you look across hospitality, so to use a broad umbrella term, that could include hotels, golf courses, other types of revenue related to some of those ventures, those are all growing in total. So we tabulated something like $575 million toward his real estate ventures last year, and that was up from the year previous to that. So one example I will give you for how this worked out. My colleagues who cover politics who follow the sort of universe of donors and favor seekers surrounding the Trump family quite closely, they have written stories about Mar-a-Lago, which is President Trump's arguably most famous resort in Florida. It's become sort of a hub for a lot of these people who might be donating to causes aligned with the president, or maybe have business before the president that they hope to lobby him on one way or another. Mar-a-Lago has boosted its initiation fees. I think in the most recent story, one of my colleagues reported the initiation fee reached as much as $1 million per member.
Wow.
And so how that sort of manifested itself in terms of Trump's income is that in 2024, he reported about $50 million from an entity linked to the Mar-a-Lago Club. And in 2025, this most recent year, as reported Tuesday, he reported $77 million from Mar-a-Lago. So that's a $27 million jump, more than 50% increase in 1 year. And we're seeing similar, albeit somewhat smaller, increases in many of the other golf courses in his portfolio. Trump National Doral near Miami climbed from about $110 million to $122 million during that same period. This is mirrored in some of the
huge jumps.
They're huge jumps. They're mirrored in some of the other golf courses in his portfolio in Ireland and Scotland as well. And then on top of that, when we look at sort of the more traditional real estate, let's say office buildings or hotel towers, et cetera, there are a growing number of international deals for, let's say, real estate developers who have a licensing agreement with the Trump organization in places like the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, India, Southeast Asia as well. There is a growing number of those international real estate deals as well, where the Trumps might not be building a hotel or might not be building a tower per se, but they're at least licensing their brand to developers in those countries to do so. And those deals typically run from, let's say, $1 million to as high as $5 or $10 million on any given year. So in addition to sort of the traditional real estate business that Trump has in New York, Florida, elsewhere, we are seeing this proliferation of these international deals, particularly in the Middle East and South and Southeast Asia.
Wow. David, I mean, some of what you were talking about there, some of those licensing agreements, does that still fall under the real estate bucket, or does that help move us into another category, the royalties bucket? I mean, it's like, I don't envy you for having to parse some of this information and make sense of it. That one chart, which I will shout out, Neil Mehta, one of your colleagues who spent some time with us here at WNYC. We're a big fan of his. But it was mind-blowing to see, the size and scale of some of these earnings, but then to understand behind the scenes how you had to figure out which earning went into which bucket.
We had a lot of discussions about this very topic, and it's just sort of a piece with how the Trump family's business operation is set up over the course of time. I poured over maybe a decade's worth of these disclosures last year, and for the Wall Street Journal, myself and some colleagues spent some time to basically publish something like a map of how this empire looks.
Wow.
And it looks something like a gigantic octopus, if you could envision that in your head. And you have obviously Trump, who is the main person. He created the family business, as well as his two eldest sons, Eric and Donald Trump Jr. And then just all of these arms reaching through real estate, reaching through media, reaching through merchandise and retail, reaching through other business ventures, reaching through cryptocurrencies, and also increasingly reaching through the traditional financial system, either through markets or through a growing number of companies in which the Trump sons are investing in public markets as well. So what we can say is just it's expanding. And a lot of these companies are owned by other shell companies. They're very difficult to track. And a lot of their income streams, where they might be say, nominally in the real estate business or nominally in the cryptocurrency industry. They actually operate through licensing deals that are overseen by other shell companies. So that is kind of how this is all structured, which makes it very difficult to understand how it actually works in practice. We have some visibility into it through both these disclosures released this past week, as well as Securities and Exchange Commission filings as well. But there's a lot that we don't have visibility to. And we're constantly trying to understand a little bit more about who the people are behind some of these deals, whether in the US or elsewhere.
Well, I'm going to bring in some of our callers. Pat in Northport has a comment / I think question that I've seen a lot of our listeners text related to what taxes, if any, the president is paying on these massive earnings. Pat, you're on WNYC. Thanks for calling.
Hi, yeah. No, I just thought that your discussion, that you should make the connection between all of these ill-gotten gains that he and his family are reaping in. You need to connect it to the deal that Todd Blanche is apparently signing off on, so that Trump, his sons, and his companies will not have to pay any income tax on any of this money. And I just want to end with greed. Thy name is Trump.
Pat, thanks for your call and letting us know exactly how you feel. David, we do see many of our listeners asking this question about what taxes, if any, the president would have to pay on that. And obviously, Pat pointing out, the likelihood that it may be very little to none based on, this potential agreement. Can you comment on that? And, what other issues does that raise for you?
Right. So I'm not a tax analyst, but from my understanding of the deal with the IRS, there was some limitation of future IRS audits of Trump or people connected to him, perhaps his family. So that obviously raises a ton of questions, per your point, Pat, about if and how they will pay taxes on this. That said, generally speaking, extremely wealthy individuals, as you probably know, they oftentimes employ what are called family offices, in addition to entire legal teams or teams of accountants whose sole job is to minimize their tax bills. So one example of this, as we saw in these financial disclosures released this week, Trump reported a surge of stock trading over the past year or two. And talking to people on Wall Street in recent weeks who have looked through some of these disclosures, these are thousands and thousands of stock trades. If you look at sort of the cadence of trades, when they were traded in any given day of the month, the sales versus purchases in particular equities, people on Wall Street tend to think, and this is what the Trump administration has said also, that this is actually part of what is a pretty common trading strategy employed in particular by wealthy individuals to mitigate capital gains taxes. You basically sell stocks when they're at a loss, I'm oversimplifying here, in order to get the tax benefit from that, and then you can maybe rebuy some somewhat similar stocks in their place. That's one example of how ultra-high net worth individuals, not just Trump, but many other people in New York and elsewhere, try to mitigate some of their taxes paid either from market gains and capital gains, but also in other parts of their portfolio, whether it's real estate or otherwise as well. But to your point, the IRS deal, if you are concerned about the taxes that public officials are paying on some of these reported income statements, that would definitely be cause for concern.
Sure. Well, we have a lot more to unpack. As you said, there are 900 pages there, David. So we're going to take a short break, but we're going to come back with our guest, Wall Street Journal reporter David Uberti, and more of your calls and texts coming up. Stick around. The Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. I'm Bridget Bergen, filling in for Brian today. My guest is Wall Street Journal reporter David Uberti, and we're talking about President Trump's financial disclosure filing. David, a listener texted a question. Why did he reveal this financial information? He always hides so much. Is he proud of it, or did he actually do something the law requires?
Well, despite all of the sort of moves against transparency by the federal government in recent years, one thing that we still do have going for us in America is that public officials, federal officials, still do have to publish periodic reports into their financial holdings as well as their transactions. So President Trump, for example, he files an annual report once a year. This is what we have that came to us on Tuesday. And it's this 900-page leviathan of information that sort of spans all of his stock trades, all of his capital gains, all of his stakes in various companies throughout his empire, everything down to a Screen Actors Guild pension that he still has that pays him out about $6,500 a month. That is all in this docket of information that comes once per year. And per my understanding, talking to ethics officials, he has to report everything in that. That's the rule. In addition to that, there are periodic transaction reports that federal officials must file. And about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago or so in May, Trump actually filed one of these periodic transaction reports with the Office of Government Ethics. And it showed this gigantic surge in stock trading that I was referencing in our earlier conversation. And so if you look at officials across the government, say Marco Rubio, Vice President Vance, people who are at federal agencies at very high levels, they all need to file these reports as well to show both elements of their wealth, if they own property, if they own particular exchange traded funds, or if they're actually selling individual stocks as well. And so those individual stock trades are oftentimes what pique our interests, because if there's something trading in a very small or particular company, that raises some questions of what information you knew about that company and when. And obviously these public officials are privy to things that the rest of us are not. So those are some of the questions that we're trying to answer from some of these disclosures, including the one that was made on Tuesday.
One other category of the earnings, in addition to the crypto and the real estate and the royalties that you included in your story, is the payout from settlements from his various lawsuits. You mentioned them, briefly as we started, but who was on the hook to the president, and how much did that bring into him?
Right. If you recall earlier in the Trump administration, there was a bunch of legal disputes with major companies. The ones that immediately come to mind are Paramount. There was a dispute with Jack Dorsey. There was additionally, I believe, a dispute with Warner Brothers Discovery as well. He, sort of surprisingly to us, President Trump actually reported the settlements from some of those lawsuits as income. And that totaled something to the effect of $86 million by our count.
Wow. Is it unusual to report settlement, is income?
It is unusual to have settlements, to say the least. So we can start there. That surprises us a little bit. I mean, a lot of this money, when it was publicly agreed to, these settlements, it was supposed to go to, say, groups affiliated with the Trump Presidential Library, or additional groups sort of around the president like that. And so while he does report this as income on these disclosures, he also lists some of those settlements going to, for example, the Donald J. Trump Presidential Library Foundation as well. So it's unclear exactly who has control of that money, to us, at least at this point. There's another organization listed here that I'm reading called the Trust for the National Mall as well. That was a $22 million settlement with Sundar Pichai, who's the CEO of Alphabet. I'm seeing another settlement with Meta Platforms, CBS, ABC News, as well as Twitter and Jack Dorsey as well. $86 million or so. Obviously, those settlements are unprecedented. And even if that money does go to foundations for the presidential library, for example, it's very unclear to us how it will be used.
David, you mentioned the huge increase. I think ballooned was the term you used in your story about the increase in earnings from his investment accounts. We were talking about this $858 million he made compared to $237 million from the previous years. In addition to the trust and investment cash accounts, you found that he had 4 new investment accounts. Who's managing the president's investments?
It's unclear to us at this point. Obviously, when someone with the access to information that President Trump has is trading stocks at this scale, it raises a ton of questions for us. I believe there was thousands of stock trades this year alone. If you just think about, you or me with our own Fidelity account, Robinhood account, I mean, that's an incredible amount of activity taking place. And obviously, Trump has access to classified information. The government is making a lot of investments and bets in individual companies with equity deals, et cetera. He has access to what we call material non-public information that could influence stock prices as well. So when he filed his transaction report into this topic last month, as well as this more recent disclosure, we started asking people both in the White House and the Trump organization about this very topic. Who is actually doing this on his behalf? And they've answered us in a very oblique way, essentially just saying that he has money managers who do this. And he has subsequently said, I think President Trump was speaking with reporters yesterday, that he has no visibility into this stock trading as well, and potentially that it might actually be automated. That could all be true. If you talk to people on Wall Street, financial analysts or traders, they say some of this activity might actually mirror trading strategies that wealthy people in particular can buy into to mitigate some of their tax losses over the course of time. But they haven't, the Trump administration or the Trump organization has not come out and said, we are working with this specific firm, and they haven't sort of unpacked for us any safeguards there might be within that setup to prevent some of that non-public material information from actually influencing what that money management firm might end up doing as well.
So I want to pick up on what you said there in terms of the president's response. We have a short clip of what the president said to justify why he seems to be doing so well. Here's something he said to reporters while he was traveling in North Dakota.
You know why I'm profiting? Because the stock market's going up. Everybody's profiting. If you have a 401k, how's your 401k done? It's about up 85%. Thank you, President Trump. So we're all profiting. I'm profiting because I have a lot of money and a lot of cash, and I give it to institutions. I don't know if they know what they're doing or not, but they buy a vast array of things.
Okay, David, can you fact check some of that for us? Has the stock market really done well enough to account for this jump in earnings?
It's possible. We have to sort of delineate between his holdings in the stock market last year versus this year, as well as the actual increase of the principal money that he's put in to the stock market, which is a little bit tougher calculation for us to make based on the information that we have. So as we reported, the total amount of money in his investment accounts ballooned from $237 million to at least $858 million, which is a huge jump. I mean, that's more than 3x in the course of a year. The stock market has not gone that high. But at the same time, a large portion of that jump could be from additional principal that Trump has added in to his investment accounts as well. So if you look at sort of the broader picture of his portfolio, his business empire, he does have a lot of things that are throwing off cash, whether it's the cryptocurrency, whether it's his real estate empire as well. It's possible he invested some of that money into the stock market as well, which could account for some of that increase from 237 to $858 million over the course of time. As far as his contention that the stock market is up 85%, I would have to disagree with that. It's up, the S&P 500 is up about 21% over the last year or so. That's the primary stock gauge that we use at the Wall Street Journal as well. And it also just goes without saying that when he was responding to some of these questions, he focused his response on how the stock market is booming, which is a true fact. It's incontrovertible, indisputable at this point. But he did not discuss everything else which is the lion's share of his income, which is the cryptocurrency in particular. And that in particular is what a lot of ethics watchdogs, as well as people in the cryptocurrency industry, are worried about, because he very clearly profited on a meme coin and a crypto project, and investors in those meme coins and crypto projects largely lost money.
Yeah, let's talk about your story from this morning about those investors. There were people who bought up the meme coin when Trump was going into office. Your story paints a pretty dire picture for people who sunk. In one case, you spoke to an individual who, was hoping to retire based on these investments. Tell us a little bit about what you heard from folks and how they're feeling about the fact that this coin is underwater.
Right. I mean, it really ran the gamut in terms of the folks my colleagues and I have spoken to about this topic, not only just yesterday, but also in recent weeks and months as well. And it sort of speaks to this weird psychology in the cryptocurrency market. It's different than anything else. It's different than you and I discussing our retirement returns or discussing the stock market. Cryptocurrencies are notoriously boom or bust. And what's more, if you have a market where meme coins are sort of an article of faith and something actually you can trade, there's an element of gambling there inherent to all of that. And there's this sort of notion of rug pulls, of people who can basically orchestrate a pump and dump for particular cryptocurrencies that essentially evaporate overnight. There's an element of danger there that's baked in that many people, at least in the cryptocurrency space, accept as a fact of life. Whereas you or I, who are investing in stocks or bonds because we want to have a nest egg to retire on, we're not thinking in the same way as well. So all of that said, the people who are actually investing in these things tended to be either Trump followers, like political followers of the president, who are sort of invested personally in his brand and agenda, as well as cryptocurrency enthusiasts who wanted to make some money off of this, or even curry favor or access to administration officials through doing so. So some of the people feel like they've been duped. That's certainly the case. I took a spin through Truth Social yesterday, and there was way more chatter about grift and investments going to zero than I have ever seen on that platform. At the same time, a few of these folks who we spoke to, who are, pretty into cryptocurrencies as investments elsewhere, I'll read you a quote from one of the guys. He said, "In crypto, people say a game is a game." And referring to Trump, this person added, "He played the game better than I did." And so that sort of just speaks to how many people who are in this space sort of accept that there could be this shadiness to a lot of what's happening there as well, which is just not something that you experience. I mean, at least I experience reporting on financial markets elsewhere. People tend to view markets as, barometers for information.
Sure.
We can accept a price. I give you something, you give me money in return. That's it. That's fair. Whereas in cryptocurrency, the calculus is a little bit different.
And yet, David, part of it, what's in your story is that some of the crypto companies themselves have been spending millions of dollars lobbying lawmakers for legislation to regulate this industry, to maybe take some of the betting aspects out of it and to set some rules. What kinds of regulations are the companies seeking?
Well, you pointed to the supreme irony with this entire situation, which is Trump in 2021, he called Bitcoin in particular, he called a scam. He said it was a threat to the US dollar. Subsequently, since being reelected, he has promised to make America the crypto capital of the world. And a lot of people in the cryptocurrency space thought that Trump was their guy. He was the person who was finally going to create rules for the road for the cryptocurrency industry, and also goes without saying, light touch rules of the road, light regulations that would allow them to operate in the US with a basically hands-off approach from federal regulators. What has actually happened since Trump came into office is that he has profited off of at least two of these cryptocurrency projects through which investors have lost a ton of money. That has harmed the credibility of the broader cryptocurrency industry. And at the same time, Bitcoin, which is seen as a weather vane for the broader cryptocurrency industry, has tanked in price.
Wow.
So a lot of people in the cryptocurrency space thought this was going to be the beginning of a golden age for their nascent industry. And what's turned out is that the main sort of asset that sort of dictates the health of their space is in the doldrums. Trump has harmed its credibility. And in doing so, he's thrown a wrench into this effort in Congress to actually create some rules and regulations for the cryptocurrency space. There's Democrats who are saying they're going to basically hold up this process in terms of writing rules for crypto, because Trump appears to be profiting from individual investors as well. So this is certainly not helping the cause of the cryptocurrency industry, which, as you said, has spent millions and millions of dollars to get this legislation and these sets of rules passed. Now they have a huge PR problem on their hands, and everyone sort of seeing the headlines, hearing the radio shows, turning on their TVs, instead of saying, here's a new piece of legislation which will usher in a more normal era for cryptocurrency. Instead, there's a lot of headlines suggesting that the president made more than $1 billion off of cryptocurrency projects that went bust. That's not exactly the outcome I think anyone wanted from this.
And David, just to put a fine point on it, you mentioned sort of how the Democrats are reacting, but as I understand, some of the legislation to regulate the industry is Republican sponsored, that there's a piece of legislation that's passed the House and that there is negotiation over a bill in the Senate. Is that right?
That's true. So people from both parties are insisting that the bill includes some provisions barring the president and other elected officials from profiting from crypto activities that would benefit from the regulations that they oversee. And this is obviously a big sticking point. And like it goes without saying, and this sort of adds to the irony of this whole situation, is that one of my colleagues spoke to Republican Senator Cynthia Lummis from Wyoming, who sponsored this bill in question. She has to negotiate with the White House on some of these provisions. So how do you think those conversations are changed now that we know that the president has made all of this money? And it sort of speaks to, when we talk to ethics officials, this is very clearly a potential conflict of interest. You mentioned the White House says conflicts of interest don't exist, but it's the lawmakers and also the people within the cryptocurrency industry who are having to sort of walk through this tangled web of conflicts that we are sort of beginning to understand from some of these financial disclosures.
Wow. David, before I let you go, I have to read this text that a listener sent. It's a little on the long side, so please bear with me, but it's an interesting story. The listener writes, I was a junior staff attorney at the Federal Reserve Board in the 80s and 90s. We were under extensive restrictions regarding financial holdings and disclosure, and were prohibited from owning any securities in financial services firms, with a short grace period in which to sell them upon starting employment there. We were also not allowed to go to any industry receptions or events where the food could not be eaten with one hand while standing up. The idea being that food had to be eaten while seated was too lavish and could compromise us professionally. I had zero influence or power. I think that what Trump has done in both his terms is absolutely criminal. I hope some Congress soon actually passes legislation that criminalizes all of it. So a very different experience than what you have found in the 900 pages that you continue to dig through. It sounds like your octopus diagram may get a little bit bigger, but we're grateful that you are sorting through it all and you have laid it out there for us. We're going to leave it there for today. My guest has been Wall Street Journal reporter David Uberti, who covers the intersection of financial markets and the economy. David, thanks for joining me. Thanks for working through all those documents. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Bridget. Take care.
WNYC's journalism and storytelling is heard by millions of passionate listeners. Sponsors of our programming gain our listeners' attention and their respect. Learn about how your organization can support WNYC and WNYC Studios at sponsorship.wnyc.org.
The United States is about to mark its 250th anniversary.
And so, on the Global Story podcast from the BBC, we're telling surprising tales of American influence on the world stage and in ordinary people's lives all across the globe.
We have this ability to export our story, and a lot of people have bought it.
I feel like the American dream is alive but not well.
From the BBC, it's the United States at 250.
Listen wherever you get your podcasts or find us on YouTube.